Let's continue with a final summary of Dakpotashi Namgyal on the bottom of page 107, where he says, I will put that explanation in a way that might be slightly easier to understand. And here he summarizes actually insight meditation. And it's a short paragraph, rich in meaning. He basically says the following. First, we need to understand all phenomena, including subject and object, to be mind. First step. All appearances are mind. Then, there is the need to examine whether a mind exists. And then, first approach would be to see whether the mind exists in the past, present, and future. I briefly mentioned that to you the other day. We would need to find a mind that exists at least in a moment, exists in such a way that it is stable for a short period of time, to be able to say it has existed in the past, and from the past it existed in the moment after, and so on. Then we find out that we cannot find anything else but the experience of being aware openly, simply, no mind to be found, to be existing as an entity in any moment of time. And then we look whether it is one mind or several minds. This is an extensive passage in the ninth Karmapa's ocean of true meaning or definite meaning, where the Karmapa wants the student to examine whether the active mind, the thinking mind, the feeling mind, is another mind, is a different mind from the non-conceptual mind, the resting mind, completely calm, without any thinking. And this we can elaborate. We have different forms of mind. We can talk about a stupid mind and an awakened mind. We can talk about a sleeping mind. So are these different mental states? Are they different minds? So very important, because the most often people think the I mind is different from the other mind. So the subject experience is a different mind from everything that this subject experiences. I and my experiences, I and my thoughts, I and my sensory experiences. And that also is very important to investigate then. Is this I, this so-called self, is that a different mind from the mind of seemingly outer or other experiences? So, then, having clarified that, I wonder if I should give you all the solutions. But anyhow, it won't help you. So, yes, it is only one and the same mind. There are no different minds. Then we try to find out whether mind arises, stays somewhere, and ceases at times. So whether there are moments without time, whether mind, and more particularly whether thinking arises from somewhere, stays somewhere, goes somewhere. Whether an emotion comes from somewhere, stays somewhere, goes somewhere. Whether the idea of self comes from somewhere, stays somewhere, goes somewhere. Whether there is a storage of all the impressions that we have had in mind, whether these movements, they go somewhere and are stocked somewhere. We have to investigate, is there a stockage from memory? We are looking in all these ideas where the idea of three-dimensional location is connected with mind. Where mind can be found. Does it have a place? And where does the contents of mind stay? Where is it experienced? Where does it go? Is it truly dissolving completely, or is there a leftover, a rest? Is it possible that because people feel overburdened by thoughts, that perhaps their recycling does not work properly? That there is something in the thoughts that needs to be taken care of after they have been thought? What leads to this experience of having too much and being cramped, being stuffed? Is it so that thoughts take space, and when there are too many thoughts, there is no place for the next experience? So we have to investigate all of that. And I tell you, the solution, no stockage, empty of nature, dissolving completely, except that the grasping can always reproduce similar thoughts. Endlessly. But they are not the same. Does not help you if I just tell it to you. You must come to a personal certainty. Fifth point, discover mind's all-pervading natural luminosity, that awareness. So, is there any aspect of life where knowing, being aware, mind is not present? Until we are sure that although mind cannot be defined and is ungraspable, this capacity to know is everywhere. And actually, I'm reminded of this famous book title, Wisdom with No Escape. When we know that mind is everywhere, we also know why we have to know mind. If we are not at ease with that quality of being, which is called mind, that quality of knowing, that capacity of knowing, that capacity of creating worlds and always new and perceiving change, if we are not at ease with that, if we don't know its nature, we will have a problem because it's everywhere. So, we discover mind's all-pervading natural luminosity, that capacity to know. Thus, we understand, sixth point, that mind does not exist as something. At this point, we have abandoned all idea that mind could be something, because something, one thing, we need to be able to separate this thing from all the other things. Now, if something is all-pervading, you cannot separate it from the rest. So it's not a thing. Awareness is part of every single experience, whether we see, hear, feel, taste, smell, or imagine, perceive all kinds of inner appearances. Okay. And in that experiencing, in that knowing, we see that subject and object never existed. And that is the Vipassana practice where we look into what we feel is me. We take the sense of self as the most interesting focus of our meditation. Whenever we get a sense of self, immediately we look. We could say investigate, but it's not. There's nothing to really hold to investigate. We immediately direct our full awareness into the center of that seeming experience of self. Nothing to be discovered, just open mind, open awareness, no thing. And we do the same when we have the strong experience of other. Probably strongest it is in fear and anger, but also in desire the feeling of other is very strong. But with fears it works very well. There is such a fear of that other crushing me, chasing me, and so on. Whatever, the danger comes from there, from the other. So wherever we have subtle or strong fears, including aversion, aggression, we go into the center of that which we're afraid of or which we don't like. And we discover that same open awareness. The illusion, poof, gone, no more fear, no more anger. Just that same open awareness as when we were looking into the subject. It does not matter whether we look first into object or subject, we can alternate, it's just the surprising discovery is that looking into the seeming core of an experience, there where it feels most dense, it's always the same nature of mind, the same awareness that shows. An experience of presence completely free of fear, anger, and so on, or the other graspings. So we understand that subject and object never existed. So just among us, please, whenever you hear a person who thinks that a self needs to be abolished, this is absolutely not true. It is only that the illusion of a stable, individual self in this changing process of being, this illusion dissolves. Because one sees that it has never been there. But the self that the psychology talks about as a process of learning, of adaptation and so on, that form of integrated self continues to become stronger and stronger. It becomes more and more capable to find its inner balance, to relate with others, to love and so on. So all the wonderful qualities of an integrated self, they simply become stronger in this process of dissolving the notion, the idea of a stable, unchanging self. So that's just to make it very clear. We also need to realize, I'm now at the 8th point, that the discerning wisdom, that this what knows, has no existence as something. So, because that would be the next clinging. There is no self, but there is the knowing of no self. And we believe that this knowing truly exists. It is more true than everything else that we have experienced before. But that also, when we look into the very center, the seeming density of knowing, of being aware, nothing is discovered except that ungraspable openness. And that is a famous example which was quoted before in the text, but which I want to mention now. Now you know that one can make fire by rubbing sticks. Yeah, it needs a special dry wood, and then if you do that long enough, close to some cinders, then at some moment it will take fire. Now, this example is being used. This rubbing of sticks, this is compared to the investigation. It is the distinguishing prajna which uses life experiences and really goes into it until the light of understanding rises. And this light of understanding is the wisdom fire, but this wisdom fire will also consume the sticks. Okay? The fire that is ignited by rubbing wooden sticks, actually, if you allow it to happen, will also burn the sticks. And in the same way, that insight, which is using dualistic processes of investigation, as it grows, it consumes that same duality that was originally used to develop the understanding. So there's no more need to continue with these dualistic processes. It's the same as before, that the discerning prajna, the discerning wisdom, becomes the luminosity. It is that what we are talking about. That which kindles the fire of understanding, the intellectual analysis, the conceptual investigation, and the non-conceptual analysis, all of what is used to remain in this search for a deeper understanding, all that finally, in the understanding, when the light of wisdom comes, all of that can relax, it is kind of burnt, it becomes unnecessary, and we simply stay in the way it is. So I repeat this sentence, that we realize that the discerning wisdom has no existence as something. It is not something that stays, just like the fire produced from rubbing wood consumes the wood and then goes out. Just basic nature of mind never goes out, but the basic nature of mind does not have to reconfirm that what was seen was seen. The ninth point is discover how that type of view, of that type of seeing, dispels all dullness and agitation. This was also slightly explained before in the previous video. It refers to the process of the meditator after the initial strong realization. A meditator who has finally entered the true seeing. He is then being told, and now, when you meditate, do not alter your state of mind with remedies. For as long as you are able to simply relax and trust the nature of mind. So go with the trust, meditate, trusting the nature of mind that all dullness and agitation will be purified by itself. And that's this step. Then, after a clear knowing, this is the main practice of the meditator. Of course, if one cannot relax like that because one is too much triggered and so on, one will use remedies. One never completely abandons remedies for as long as one might have a use. One might develop compassion when there is anger if one cannot relax through the anger and see through the anger, and so on. Number 10, the schism between perceiver and perceived, subject and object, is gone, together with the faults of apprehending characteristics and conceptualizing. Now, I explained this process before with apprehending characteristics. I see a pencil because I can see the various characteristics of a pencil. The typical form, the tip, even indicated 0.5, so I know the size of the pencil with which I will write. And just to verify, normally there's a rubber behind. And that's another characteristic where I know that with this gum I can gum out the errors. So all the characteristics are there, and this clinging, if I think that because characteristics are perceived, there is a thing called pencil, that's the normal structure of dualistic reality. I see something with certain characteristics, and because these characteristics are there, this is the thing. It's normal, it's reliable, we can work with that. But for a realized person, one can, although working with a pencil and being able to talk about it, there is a clear knowing that the experience of pencil is in mind, although it is in my hand. But that the feeling of weight and temperature and so on is actually perceived in mind. That the idea of pencil is a very relative one. It could be a weapon in the hand of someone else, in the mind of someone else. It could be a landing place for a fly. It could be all kinds of things. It is only a limited perspective of a phenomenon where I think that the characteristics are stable. But actually, if I were brutal now, I could break off all the characteristics that make this into a pencil. Where would the pencil be? So the characteristics themselves are not stable. So, from the clinging to seemingly stable characteristics, a normal person comes to the idea of a stable object, and that stable object is separated from the perceiver, from the subject. For an awakened person, it is absolutely clear that there is no stable characteristics, there's not a stable thing, and there is not a separated perceiver, because from the beginning, the process of seeing, touching, feeling, so-called characteristics is happening in that same mind that others separate into subject and object. So that becomes very clear, and with that, the basis for illusion crumbles. There is no subject engaging in seeming objects anymore as being separate. And even in the dream state at night, dreams do not form anymore. There is no one separate from the dreams, putting oil on the fire of desire, fear, fascination, and so on. There is no one interested in a story seemingly separate from a perceiving self. So all of that comes to a stop, comes to a rest. This whole world of unnecessary complexity, of complications, elaborations, all these projections which we normally add on to the experience, all that comes to peace. And then, this would be the 11th step, mind rests in the non-conceptual samadhi. Here we would say the deep awareness of the absence of characteristics. That there are no truly existing characteristics, without any need to create a forceful certainty. So, mind then seems to stay, first for some periods in meditation, but later on throughout all activities, day and night, in a non-conceptual ongoing samadhi, in full activity, there is the deep knowing, the deep undistracted knowing of the nature of phenomena, where characteristics, so the seeming characteristics of separated objects, are not conceptualized as separate or truly existing, and then this awakened being seems to be able to play with the different views of these qualities of experience and seems to be able to change into the different views of people concerned and engages in the awakened activity free from clinging to solidity, free from clinging to characteristics. It's called the samadhi of the absence of characteristics. No more separation is present in mind. And there is no need for forcefully, willfully creating a certainty. The certainty is not even something that one is preoccupied with. No one ever fears to lose a certainty. No one has to produce a certainty. There's no effort needed anymore. So these 11 points are actually pretty much of what is found on top of page 108. They are not listed as 11 points, but this is like a beautiful final ornament of this section of Dakputashi Namgyal, and one can find most of the Vipassana practices taught in our tradition and in general Mahayana tradition. One can find them in there. And this is what one goes through in one's practice. And Dakputashi Namgyal finishes saying, well, this was the general outline of what we need to know in order to practice a truly liberating meditation in accordance with the Buddhist sutras, tantras, and oral instructions of the great masters. And this finishes part 1 of the book. The common approach to shamatha and vipassana, mental calm and insight meditation. And it can serve as a guideline also for all practitioners engaged in Mahamudra practice, Dzogchen practice, Zen practice, Vipassana practice, all of that. Everyone can use that, independent of their tradition.